Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you all for joining us. This is the HAPI FHIR and Smile CDR Hippo release webinar. This is our second kick at the can, giving named releases publicly, so Hippo is it. Like all cool open source projects, we're going with names that start with increasing letters of the alphabet. I figure if it's good enough for Ubuntu, it's good enough for us. So this time around, rather, is Hippo. As a reminder, we are doing these every 3 months now. So we have got, we're doing this now, and we will be back again in August with the next release. So there we go. Let's dive into it. I am, of course, James Agnew. I am the project lead for the HAPI project, as well as head geek here at Smile CDR, where we're broadcasting from this morning. Looking forward to talking a little bit about the new releases that are coming out. In terms of format, this will be a relatively short webinar, I expect. We're going to talk for the first half about what's new in HAPI FHIR 3.8.0. And then for the second half, we will talk about what's new in Smile CDR 2019.05. So let's start here. We have got tons of changes in this release. Counting the major sort of changes, I see 50 in HAPI FHIR in our changelog, 56 in Smile CDR. Anyone wondering about that picture? This is from our release party, which took place last week. The team here all went out for karaoke. I suspect a number of you listening have probably interacted with Clem Ng, who leads up sales on our side. What you may not know about Clem is that he is a great singer. Clem is with some partners right now, turning probably bright red, because I'm embarrassing him just like he is in this picture. Way to go, Clem. You're a good singer. So first things first, around HAPI FHIR, I'd like to introduce to the world our new logo. It occurs to me I should have added to this slide our old logo for anyone who can't picture it. But for anyone who's wondering, the former logo that was that we used to, oh God, what's going on here? For anyone who's wondering, the old logo that we used to use, I drew myself in Microsoft Paint a long time ago. You might recognize it as a little XML tag with a smiling emoji that I think I found on Google Images. So that was a good example of a logo designed by a developer. We have a new logo that is not a logo designed by a developer, and I could not be more excited about that. So anyone who's going to be at the FHIR Developer Days, event in Seattle, or who's going to be around us at any point in the next while, ask us for stickers. We'd love to see we'd love to see our little raccoon mascot sitting on people's laptops, and we've got some awesome stickers that will help you do that. So way to go, Alicia, who designed the logo. So things of note that are in the new release. First and foremost in HAPI FHIR is a change that is a massive change that will have very little user visible effect right now, but is underneath everything is a huge change. I spoke about it briefly on our previous release webinar, and that is our new Interceptor Framework, which is really exciting to me. Interceptors have always been a big part of HAPI FHIR. They allow you to layer all kinds of custom functionality on top of servers, on top of clients. And they have just gotten a whole lot better. With the new framework, interceptors can be attached to individual threads. They can be global. They can also be attached to all kinds of new events in HAPI FHIR that weren't previously interceptable, if that's a word. So we're gaining this incredible control to do all kinds of new things with interceptors that we couldn't do before, which is really exciting, I think. I won't go too much into code here, and this is the only code slide I'm going to talk about today, but what you see on the left is the way interceptors used to work. They, of course, were Java interfaces that you implemented and then overread individual methods. We've moved to an annotation-based mechanism for interceptors, which really is aligned with the way the rest of HAPI FHIR works, which is great. We now use this new @hook annotation to designate an individual method as being an interceptor method. We've got this point cut enum that tells you what you're intercepting into. And we are constantly adding new point cuts, which are basically spots in HAPI FHIR. You can add your own interceptor logic. All kinds of cool stuff is going to come out of that. In terms of where we're at with the new framework, the framework is complete. I should stress that despite the fact we have introduced an entirely new, rewritten from the ground up Interceptor framework, our goal was to maintain 100% backward compatibility with existing interceptors, and we have done that. So if you've got a solution that is written that uses interceptors, don't worry, they're not going to break. They'll keep working exactly as they always have. You may want to consider migrating to the new Interceptor framework anyway. You'll probably get a performance boost by doing so. And as soon as we write documentation on migrating, that will go up on the website. Probably in the next few days, we'll start getting that documentation up. Don't worry, nothing breaks, as I want to stress. We are in the process of migrating all of the existing HAPI FHIR interceptors to use this new framework. We're also in the middle of an effort to add all kinds of new point cuts, which are basically little spots within HAPI FHIR's pipelines that you can add your own interceptor logic to. Specifically, the JPA server is getting a ton of these things, and we're doing that for two reasons. One is to introduce a number of performance utilities. We've started writing interceptors that will allow you to get great visibility into the internals of how the server is working, and that is really useful for performance tuning. It will now be possible for you to get, to get a view into what SQL is being generated, to get warnings and hints from the server about, parameter search parameter combinations that are less performant, and suggestions for optimization. So a fair bit of performance work coming out of this interceptor work, as well as the introduction of a consent API. This is something I spoke about on the last webinar, and I'm really excited to keep talking about. One of my biggest goals in moving us towards this new interceptor framework was to power this. So watch for details around the consent service coming soon. This should be a really interesting thing. 21 at the Developer Days event, I will be introducing the consent service in much more detail in a presentation at Developer Days, which happens in, I believe, 2 weeks from now. So we've got another 75% to complete in the next 2 weeks. It's going to be busy times. Very exciting, our JPA Starter Project. This is another thing I spoke about on the last webinar. It existed on the last webinar. It has really come to its own in the last few months. And I've got a great big thanks to Sean McIlvena for that. He is leading up efforts on the JPA Starter Project to convert it into something which really allows the JPA module to shine. Most importantly, he came up with this awesome innovation of using a properties file for configuration, and that module is just great now. So if you're looking to get started with HAPI FHIR, you can configure all kinds of things in this nice properties file. So these days, you don't even need to write code to get a working HAPI FHIR JPA server up. And it's pretty easy to get it against alternate backends, to turn on WebSockets, turn on cores, whatever the things are you want to configure. That project can do it. I should mention, and this is fairly important, we have one security issue to mention. I guess we owe a great big thanks to Mudit Punia, who came to us and said we were doing vulnerability assessments for a client and found a security problem with the Testpage overlay module. He made a great disclosure. We quietly fixed that about 2 weeks ago and are now today disclosing that. The issue itself would not affect you unless you're using the Testpage overlay. You would know that as the web-based UI that sits in front of hapi.phir.org. So most production servers do not even use that module. I think this is a fairly low-risk thing, but if you are using that module in a solution, we definitely recommend you upgrade immediately, just because there is a potential for scripts to be run without the knowledge of users. So there we go. We will be applying for a CVE number for this vulnerability now that this is released as well. So more to come on that. Oh, we've got 2 bullets here and only 1 message. Interesting. In terms of enhancements to the server layer, I should mention that the JSON patch, which I was never aware that anyone was using patch, and somehow in the last few months, we've had tons of people come out of the woodwork saying, hey, we love doing patching in FHIR. So, this isn't working and that isn't working. It seems that JSON patch is the most popular way people do that. So we have actually rewritten the JSON patch module from the ground up. And that brings all kinds of benefits. Specifically, it works. It's a much more complete implementation. It also gives you much more helpful error messages if there's something wrong with your patch, which is quite nice. The validator has seen tons of enhancement as well. Validation is always a popular topic, has been since the start of FHIR. Lots of people these days are using the validator to validate questionnaires and questionnaire responses. Certainly some of those people are doing SDC, the structured data capture stuff, but lots of people are doing other things as well. We owe a great big thanks to Matti Utsalo, who has put quite a bit of work actually into questionnaire validation. Also worth mentioning, we have made changes to value set-based code validation, which is really anytime you're doing terminology validation within a FHIR profile. If you're not validating against the core spec, you're probably using value sets there. It's now possible to do that without needing Apache Lucene. Previously, you had to have the Lucene engine turned on in the JPA server. So this makes this a little bit more lightweight, which is quite nice. There have also been countless fixes involving, I'll say, complex slicing validation. So profiles that involve all kinds of slices and nested slices and that type of thing. Slicing I love. It's a topic that you can say it and you sound really smart, and I have to admit I don't understand it nearly as well as I wish I did, but there are all kinds of enhancements in the validator these days around that. I think we should probably call out Graham Grieve, who continues to maintain the validator and has really put tons of work into that very complicated area of the code base. The JPA server, which is certainly the most popular part of HAPI FHIR these days, has had, first off, countless performance enhancements. A large number of the changelog entries have to do with that, including a bunch of stuff around composite search parameters, which is quite neat. I should mention specifically the expunge operation, which is gaining traction quite quickly. This is a HAPI FHIR extension that allows people to physically delete data, mostly people who are dealing with GDPR requirements in Europe, but also people in other places love the idea of deleting data if for use cases they need. That operation was introduced in the last round. It's now a very performant operation. It used to be quite slow, so that is awesome. I will also mention one of the longest standing gripes with the HAPI FHIR server is the inability to do client assign numeric IDs. I suspect there are a few people scratching their heads about what that means. Really all that means is some servers will allow clients to assign the ID of a resource instead of letting the server do it. HAPI has always had a rule that that's possible, but the IDs cannot be purely numeric. We've introduced a concept called client ID mode, and with a bit of configuration, it's now possible to use client assigned identifiers that are purely numeric. So that's not default, but it can be turned on, which is nice. Also worth mentioning in the JPA server, we have been distributing a migrator tool since roughly HAPI 3.3 that allows you to upgrade an in-place installation of the JPA server up to the latest version of the JPA server. A big thanks to Gary Graham, who contributed a pull request to add support all the way down to HAPI FHIR 2.5. So if anyone is on an older version of HAPI FHIR and wants to upgrade to the latest version, the migrator tool will now allow you to go a good ways farther back, which is just great. So thanks a bunch for that, Gary. Where are we going next? So a bunch of stuff coming. I was talking about Interceptor APIs and the consent API. That work is progressing, and I suspect we will have an announcement about that quite quickly. We are starting work on an API for doing EMPI services within HAPI FHIR. I'm not going to say any more than that about that yet for what that means, but we're super excited about that. I think we're seeing tons of people using both HAPI FHIR and Smile CDR in the context of very big deployments with an EMPI in the middle. So we're realizing that FHIR and EMPIs go hand in hand. We're excited to be adding better support for that. Lots of people have been asking about bulk data support. There is a specification called the Bulk Data API, which comes out of a bunch of work in the US realm. Specifically, they first created a bulk export spec. There's now a bulk import spec being trialed as well. We've got support nearly complete in HAPI FHIR for those. We're also working pretty hard, and we've got an entire round of enhancements around the terminology service that's just kicking off. This is all thanks to our ongoing partnership with the Regenstrief Institute and Loink specifically. So a bunch of work to come there, but we'll see lots of performance enhancements and some functionality enhancements as well as far as terminology validation. Not just validation, actually, terminology operations go in the next while. So that's pretty exciting. Moving on to Smile CDR. Lots of work there. I was reviewing the changelog this morning one last time to see what should go into this webinar. And the thing that really jumped out at me is just the staggering amount of enhancements, fixes, changes that have gone into the HL7 v2.x layer. When we started, we kind of, we thought this was just a little side layer that some people would use. The ability to do both inbound and outbound HL7 version 2 have proven to be extremely popular features within the product. So we've had so many customer requests come into that and made so many changes there. It's been keeping us very busy, let's just say that. Lots of added fields, lots of added mappings, and that covers both directions, stuff going into Smile, stuff going out. We have started to add support for ADT outbound. We've got our first outbound message type supported, and certainly more to come there. One functionality change worth calling out is we are now, for outbound orders, so any order resources that are created in Smile CDR that are then configured to create an outbound orders HL7 v2 feed will now use the OMG 019 message type instead of what we realized was the legacy ORM 001 type. So that's a functionality change that's come through. On the CDA Exchange module, which is of course the module that allows you to create CDA documents based on data sitting inside your FHIR repository, we have added support for the conversion of narratives. FHIR, of course, borrows the concept of HTML narratives from CDA and certainly improves it. We will now bring narratives across when we're generating CDA documents, as well as a number of fixes to observation mappings. A popular use, of course, for CDA documents is creating documents that have summaries of lab data. And a number of data types and field enhancements have gone into that as well. We have made great big enhancements to the subscription module within Smile CDR. Lots of people these days using FHIR subscriptions as a mechanism for moving data around. Subscriptions remain one of my very favorite parts of the spec personally. The most exciting thing there is we have added an additional mechanism for doing the messaging part of subscription. Previously, ActiveMQ was required as the messaging engine that underpinned everything. We have now added support for Apache Kafka. Way to go, Ken, for implementing that. I suspect we're going to see lots of people moving to Kafka in the next while. It really does provide a great way of doing this stuff. And I know Ken has some really interesting ideas for where to go next with that support. Subscriptions keep getting faster, which is great. On top of Kafka, just the actual code layer that implements everything keeps getting performance enhancements, so they're getting better and better. I should also mention that previously WebSocket subscriptions were only available in HAPI FHIR. We had not added them to Smile CDR. That has been fixed. So there is now an endpoint module that can be configured that brings support for WebSockets as a subscription delivery mechanism, which is very cool, I think. In terms of other enhancements to the server, all of the performance enhancements I spoke about with HAPI FHIR, of course, are included. In fact, all enhancements in HAPI FHIR are included in the current release of Smile CDR as a part of our concurrent release strategy. One of the biggest ticket items, this is something that has been very heavily requested over the last year by people using Smile, has been filters on the transaction and audit logs. You will see on the screen a set of a screenshot actually from our transaction log, and as you can see, there are now a bunch of drop downs that allow you to filter out individual items. So way to go, Jennifer, for implementing that. We know that's going to be a very popular feature as people start to upgrade to the new version. A number of security enhancements worth mentioning. I've got a couple of highlights here. As people start to roll out sort of, effectively little mini institutional app stores taking advantage of Smart on Fire capabilities, we're realizing that people want the ability to remove client and server definitions, not just add them. So it's kind of funny. We didn't previously have that support, but of course people need that. So that's been added. We've also added an endpoint to the Smart on Fire OpenID Connect server that allows for self-service client secret rotation. This never even occurred to me when we originally developed that module, but of course, lots of people these days have decentralized architectures where they'd like clients to manage their own secrets, change them periodically, and that type of thing. So an endpoint's been added there, and it's got a bunch of neat features around allowing grace periods and individual client secrets to last a little bit longer when a new one's added and that type of thing. That is, of course, an optional feature. You don't have to use it, but it is a part of the core product these days. One of the things I feel like this is an unsung hero, but our documentation page just keeps on getting better. This was a subtle change that actually happened probably a month and a half ago, and I don't know if everyone even noticed it happened, but the documentation page got a whole lot of love. It's now got a search bar. It's now got in-page navigation on the right. These are things that modern documentation platforms tend to have, so documentation keeps getting better and better. Anyone who's using the documentation, hopefully you'll get a smile out of that. So where are we going next on the Smile CDR side? We have a great big active project to add support finally for Docker-based deployments, as well as optionally Kubernetes-based auto-scaling deployments, which is to say that if you are a Docker shop but not a Kubernetes shop, that's awesome. We're going to have an official sort of build recipe and an official container for you to use for Docker support. If you are using Kubernetes for deployment, we're also in the middle of figuring out all of the intricacies involved in getting Smile CDR deployed to that environment as well. One feature worth talking about that is sort of underway is a feature that we're calling live bundles. I suspect we'll talk a whole bunch more about that on a future webinar, but live bundles will allow you to build up sort of dashboards on top of FHIR repositories that contain all kinds of scattered information mined out of various resources without needing to do a whole bunch of FHIR queries at the time you're building the dashboard. So live bundles will be great for people who want better performance there. One other thing I will allude to, but not quite expand on, because we're only kicking it off now, is we're finally starting to look at support for alternate database backends. What do I mean by that? I mean that today we support relational databases, and we support a number of them as storage mechanisms. We are starting to look at support for NoSQL-based stores, for time-based stores, for other things. And we've already got a bunch of work in flight there, and that work is only going to increase. So I suspect in the coming months, we'll have some interesting stories to tell around other ways of storing data for specific types of data that would benefit from that. The only other thing I'll say we're going to do next, and this one is completely on me. I thank everyone who's joined us today for this webinar, despite the incredibly short notice. I take full responsibility for that. Clem, who we saw at the start, started bugging me to nail down a date probably 2 months ago, and I did a terrible job of that. So I will promise you all, and I will promise Clem for that matter, that we'll be a little bit more organized for the next webinar. So with that, I will pause. I don't know why I said questions, comments, because we really don't have a forum for that. But if you have questions or comments, do get in touch with us. There's lots of ways of doing that. We've got websites and email addresses and all those good things up on the screen. So I will end it there. Thank you to everyone who joined us today. We really appreciate you spending the time. We have recorded this webinar naturally, so we will make a recording available. And of course, please feel free to check in for that. Please feel free to share that with people and all of that stuff. So that's that. Thank you very much, everyone.